Welcome to Brew House. We are so glad that you have joined us. This is a weekly podcast and videocast series. We make fun of bad coffee. We love drinking good coffee. And more importantly, we really enjoy discussing and answering the tough questions that you guys, our wonderful audience, are asking us each and every week. So look forward to you guys tuning in. Every single week, we are going to answer a different question and just give you some of our thoughts and ideas around it. We would love participation, so please feel free to comment, email us, provide us feedback. We want to hear from you because this is only as good as the questions you ask.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Brew House. As
It's been a while.
it has, and I hope that they've missed us.
One would hope.
You know, I mean, because we are a couple of handsome guys, full of hair.
One of us is.
For sure. But anyway, we took a bit of a break during the holidays, and so we're back in the studio now, and we are recording things for you. And so we just want you to know we've missed you. We haven't missed each other because we work together.
Not nearly as much as we hope people have missed us.
Right. And just as a refresher, I'm Shane.
I'm Brennan.
And welcome back to, is it quarter two, season
two? We're going to call this season two.
Season two, okay.
We did our intro season to kind of get our footing under us.
Yes.
We got an idea, a sense of where we're going now.
Yes.
And I will say, I'm actually quite excited we took a break. Not just because, you know, we got a bit of a break, but because...
and we needed it,
and we needed a break.
Because we do pastor on the side.
On the side.
Yes.
That's our side gig.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things that happened during our break between season 1 and season 2 is we have received a couple of incredible coffees that have been sent to us.
Oh man, actually like 5 or 6.
5 or 6 that I am so excited to just get to taste over the next couple weeks. And we're going to, like we do every episode, we'll start and have a cup of coffee. We'll talk about it a little bit, maybe highlight for the viewers and the people listening, different coffees, things that we like about them, different brewing methods, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be awesome. And just so you know, that's the reason why we call it Brew House, is because we love coffee.
Love coffee.
And you know, a good cup of coffee is all in the way you brew it.
That's right.
And how you brew it. But we also thought it was kind of a cool segue to talk about things of faith and culture.
That's
and
right.
Questions, things that are brewing around in our minds.
One might say percolating.
Yes, there you go, man.
That's a terrible punny joke.
So anyway,
I got more. Just let me know if you want some.
Yes. So anyway, so that's what we do. We take coffee, and this season, I have to be honest with you, is going to be like much better coffee than some of the coffees we had last season.
We're going to raise the bar.
We're going to raise the bar because last season we were doing all kinds of things like Tim's
Instant delicious coffee
and Folgers through an espresso maker. We will never.
Are you sure? I can make you another cup.
We will never do that again. That was the nastiest stuff around. So anyway, so each episode we start off with talking about coffee. And today we have a very, very special coffee sent to us. My cousin lives in Washington, D.C., which...
Great place, I hear. Good things happening.
Which I don't know about that right now. And so she sent up a coffee that is right here. And Brennan, would you tell us exactly what the coffee is?
The name of it or the type of coffee?
The type.
I can get one of them right and one of them may be right.
Okay, the type of coffee, and then I'll say the name.
All right. It is a whiskey barrel aged medium roast with extraordinary rye note.
Oh, I can't wait to try this, man.
That at this point it sounds like it doesn't even sound like true coffee. It sounds like something better than coffee.
Exactly, and that's our hope. And this is from Kentucky, which is in the Washington, D.C. area. And the name of the lady that owns this, her name is Kelly. And my cousin Leah sent this up to us and swears by her coffee. And so we're going to give it a try.
Nice.
And you know what? We're actually going to have a link to her website where you can actually get in touch with her. You can order this coffee. Even if you're living in Canada like we are right now, you can still order this
coffee. Bring it
coffee.
across the border.
And so we're going to go ahead and give this a try. I will tell you that in grinding this and in I almost said percolating, and brewing
Didn't
this,
percolate it.
the notes
that's
are
good.
amazing.
That's
So
really good
here we
coffee,
go.
Shane.
Oh, my
What do you think of that? That's a good cup of coffee.
That might be the best coffee I've ever had.
Ooh.
And I'm just shooting straight here. Like, not because I brewed it, but
That's a pretty rich note coffee.
It
like
is.
That
Like,
hits you, and
it
then
is.
it just kind of keeps going. It doesn't fall off like a lot of coffee, right?
yeah, and there is a lot of depth in this. And the whiskey barrel, you can definitely taste the notes, but it's not like a hard punch in the face, right?
It's not aggressive. It's not going to knock you over. You don't got to worry about anything like that. But this is, you know what this would be great for? This is a great dessert coffee.
Absolutely.
Right? Like an evening coffee with people. You've had a sweet, like any type of sweet dessert, and then you brew this cup of coffee, it would pair extraordinarily well with that.
Honestly, I don't even want to talk right now. I just want to drink this coffee. Man.
This episode may just be 30 minutes of us drinking coffee.
Exactly. This coffee, I am not just, I'm not one to blow things up and make them better than they are.
Oh,
But my friends, you must contact Kelly at Katoken and
that's delicious.
order this whiskey barrel aged coffee, because I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. It might even put you off other coffees.
Now, I will say, we are very excited. This is a delicious cup of coffee. I almost don't want to talk because I just want to keep drinking it.
Exactly.
But
I made a
you will
section.
notice, for those watching on YouTube, because we post this on YouTube and as well as podcast.
Yes.
But for those watching, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening, you'll just have to imagine this. But behind me, we actually have a number of other coffees that we're going to taste over this season, and they have been sent to us from the island.
Yes.
Your previous home.
Yes. There is actually a friend of mine named Curtis Winkering.
Yeah.
And he lives on Vancouver Island, was part of our church, part of my small group.
Yeah.
A great family, great guy. And worked with his dad, really good guy. And there's a place called Drum Roasters.
Drum Roasters.
And that was actually the pace that took me off Starbucks.
There you go.
It is amazing. And so we'll get to try
You're
those.
you're hoping that it takes me off Starbucks as well, aren't you?
I am, because Starbucks is nasty.
See, I still really like
Starbucks
Starbucks.
is absolutely nasty. But anyway,
There you go.
sorry, Starbucks. But listen, in all seriousness, Kelly, thank you so much for sending out the coffee. Leah, thank you for sending this. This is amazing coffee. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, with everything that you guys are going through right now, you need some heaven in your life. And I promise you,
This is a little
this right
cup of heaven.
here is a little cup of heaven that you will definitely appreciate.
There you go. Well, we hope you guys, if you get a chance, honestly, go take a look. Order a little bag like this. You will not be disappointed. It is a delicious cup of coffee. I think we have to take a break and enjoy this for a moment, and
sure.
then we'll come back.
And the link will be
Link will be in the bio on our YouTube and our podcast page. You
all right,
betcha.
fantastic.
All right, guys. Well, we've taken a second to enjoy a cup of delicious coffee, but we are super excited to get into season 2, because what we're going to do with this season is we're actually going to go back to season 1 a little bit, just a little.
Yes.
And we're going to revisit some of the really great questions that some of our listeners and some of our colleagues, friends of ours had sent in to us. And this time we're gonna take a look at answering those questions from our theological and biblical perspective.
Yep.
Because we are both pastors, we've both gone through lots of ups and lots of downs and have had some life experience that has shown us different things.
Yes.
But the one thing that both of us agree on is that a life that has a faith-informed or a faith-answered mindset is one that can really lead you forward.
Yes.
We've seen it in our counseling. Both of us are involved in that world. And so it's something that we are very passionate about and we think is going to be, hopefully, really helpful for the listeners.
And I think one of the things that people have to remember is that faith, everybody puts their faith in something.
Right.
Even if you're from kind of like an atheistic bent, you're putting your faith in the fact that you believe that this is all that there isn't anything else,
Yep.
that kind of thing. And so all of us, in one variant or another, are informed by what we put our faith in.
Right. And I would say, if we go back to the first season, we asked some pretty big questions. Mm-hmm. And the thing I want people to understand is God isn't intimidated by our questions.
No, not at all.
Right? In fact, I would say God welcomes our questions.
Actually, I would take it a step further. I think he's actually upset if we don't
Right?
ask the questions.
Right? And that's why I think the church should be confident and willing to inquire about complex issues, right? The important thing is, as we ask questions, it's critical that those questions are derived from a very stable foundation, because it becomes pointless to ask deep questions if a learner is not capable of constructing ideas and then turning them into actions.
Right.
And that's what we want to do with this second season is we want to ask those questions, but then we want to understand the foundation from where we want to answer them.
Right.
So if you're from a church background or a Christian perspective, you're going to understand a lot of these themes. If you're not from a church background or a Christian perspective, that's okay. What we're going to hopefully do is unpack where our perspective comes from, where it's grounded, so that you can understand where we get our answers.
And I think some of what will come out maybe in this episode and future episodes is that, we're all informed by something. And I think the two predominant factors is usually faith and culture, right? Like those are probably the two big ones, because culture could be art, music,
Anything.
any of that stuff.
Yep.
So we're really impacted by both. And I think sometimes when people hear the word faith, they think faith opposed to culture,
Right.
but it's not. Actually, I think faith comes into a culture, which I think there's evidence of in the scriptures.
Yep.
And it accents the best parts of those cultures, right? Like, and the parts that aren't so good, that I think every culture has those parts in it, it actually will bring those parts into the light, right?
It's a really good point. It gets me thinking about, so a person's actions, right? The way that we interact with society, the way that we go about our lives, the emphasis that we place on different parts of our lives, all of that is a reflection of our thinking. It's a reflection of how we are approaching things, right? And most of us would prefer to really come up with very simple right or wrong answers, right? Whenever we're confronted with something, whenever we engage with society or culture, we kind of want a simple yes or no response to something that we see. What do you do if there's conflicting answers, though? Because I think what we've seen in our society in the last 15, 20 years is there's a lot of conflicting opinions, and our answers that we're going to come up with, they are in conflict with maybe what culture says on a variety of topics, right? And so there's two kinds of problems. Those whose solutions we know and those that we don't know yet, right? And I think when we approach faith, hopefully that's an encouraging way for people to look at it, because faith is about a journey. You and I have talked about this a lot in the past.
Absolutely.
And so if you're wrestling with faith, if you're wrestling with aspects of your faith that you don't know what to do with, I would just encourage you to really approach that there are solutions that there's answers and then there's solutions or answers that you don't know yet, and there is a process that you can find them.
And I think the thing or the idea that I think churches have to grapple with, and I think this is really, really key, especially, you growing up in the church, being a pastor in the church. I've been pastoring for 26 years. One of the things that I find is a default setting for church people is that when faith seemingly clashes with culture's wrong.
Right.
But that's not always the case, because where I'm from, the deep South in the U.S., churches actually used to affirm slavery.
Right.
Culture was saying, no.
Maybe that's wrong.
That's bad, right? That's a bad thing. Or that because of your skin color, you couldn't come to this restaurant or this church or whatever. And it seemed like churches were following suit with that and saying, okay, culture, you're trying to get rid of those obstacles.
Yep.
That's bad. And so we've seen that you can actually create a faith culture that actually isn't about Jesus.
Very easily.
and actually culture was right.
Yep.
And so I think when we go to answer that question, what happens when faith and culture conflict?
Yep.
I think we have to ask the question why, and not automatically have the default that culture's wrong and faith is right, because maybe it isn't.
Well, and that's a really good point. I'm in my 30s. You're close to your 30s.
Sure.
We'll go with that. But let me say, the older that I get, and again, you pointed out, so I come from a very religious background, growing up in the church. I exited the church for a while. I came back to the church. I wrestled with that. But the older I get, it seems that more problems and more questions that I have, more things around faith, they fall into this I don't know yet category, or I'm unsure about this category. Even things that were instilled in me at a very young age, I now have come to kind of grapple and wrestle with. And I think that's been incredibly healthy for me personally, right? Where I've seen this be very destructive is often in friends and colleagues around me that I grew up with, where they had these very instilled beliefs and they never grappled with them, never questioned them. And it really led them into some very dark places, some devastating places, because they either chose to completely believe it and not understand why, or they completely got rid of it.
Right.
Right. And abandoned it. And I don't think either of those is a healthy place. Right. And so, again, we want people to grapple with these questions and understand that for us, it is a faith-informed and faith-answered. When we approach things that we're struggling with, whether it be culture, society, personal things, whatever, we want to approach it from a place of a very rooted biblical perspective, but also be willing to ask questions as to, well, why does the Bible say this? Why is it instructing me to do this? Rather than just take it on its merits alone. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think it is. And I think, faith culture for a long time wanted not to embrace culture.
Right.
They wanted to change it all, right? And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but one time I went to this, I used to be a youth pastor.
Yep.
You know the pain of that. And we went on a mission trip to Mexico, but it wasn't like deep in Mexico.
Right.
We just went right across the border.
Been there.
And it absolutely changed my idea of immigration, sending people back to Mexico, because people were living in dumps. They were living like literally in the city landfill and having to pay taxes.
Right.
To live there, and living in cardboard cities and that kind of thing. But I remember we actually went to the landfill and people living in the landfill. It was just heartbreaking. It was heart-wrenching. And then I looked over and because I'll be kind, I don't want to say the affiliation of the church, but they came in and built this unbelievable church.
Right.
In the dump. And I'm thinking, you put all that money into building that versus embracing the culture that you're in and helping lift people up out of poverty and those kind of things. Now, their faith tradition would have said that's what God would have wanted, or this is the right thing to do, or whatever. Or actually, I think that's another example where sometimes people of faith culture has missed the mark on how to actually involve themselves in people's lives and the culture around them.
Right. Yeah, it's this idea that if we hold things so tight and we're not willing to step back and approach things with a fresh perspective, or even the ability to say, you know what, maybe I don't know the answer. Maybe the answer I thought I had to this particular issue or question, maybe I need to just reevaluate it. The danger is when we don't do that, we really retreat to this safe and simple position, and we often become very opinionated and entrenched. And we touched on that briefly last season. We're going to talk about it a little bit more this season. Right. If we become opinionated, or we can go to the very opposite place, right? And we escape to this very difficult, we're all entitled to our own opinion stance, right? And we embrace relative truth. And I've seen in my life in places, and I've seen in Christian circles that approach, and that's not really helpful either, because it doesn't actually respond from a biblical position. And really, for us, it really comes back to how do we respond from a biblical Christian faith perspective while still allowing questions around that, right? And I would say our challenge is to pursue how to find the truth or the best solution for people, right? And that's why critical reasoning, moral evaluation, and faith-informed discernment is so critical in our pursuit of wisdom, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you said just a few minutes ago is really critically important for us to understand is that we want to make decisions on something that's not always shifting.
Right.
Right? And that's one of the things that I think if we drill down into faith, right?
Yep.
We will find that there's certain principles that they just don't change no matter what culture you're in.
Whether we want them to or not.
Exactly. And so it's always calling us to be people of generosity, compassion, kindness, grace, mercy, loving your neighbor as yourself, those kind of things, living life not for yourself, but for the benefit of others. And I think those are time and true cores of faith,
right,
that they're not shifting. And so when I'm looking at, okay, how do I respond to culture, or how do I live my life? Because again, faith is action.
Yeah.
How do I live my life? Well, if those elements aren't in my life, then I'm not a person of faith.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so I think that that's critically important, but also that helps us understand that some things in culture are very fluid.
Right.
So 1 minute we may be embracing something in culture, and 10 years later, that might be, man, what were we thinking, right?
Yep.
And I think we're probably going to have a lot of that coming out of some of the stuff that we've been through. People are going to go, what were we thinking?
Yeah, and so you raise a really good point in that there are some things that are just foundational that don't move. And then there are some things that will change and adjust over time. The difficulty, I think, when you respond in faith is, well, which is which? How do I actually determine for myself, for my family, for those around me, if this is something that I should really hold true to, or if this is something that I can adjust, budge, move my position on? And biblically, we look at this idea that constantly God was encouraging those that he was in relationship with to increase in wisdom.
Yes.
And there was a process for them to do that, right? And we call that discernment.
Yes.
Right? There was a spiritual element to discernment, and there was just a practical wisdom element to discernment. And so that is the process by which we find a faith-informed and faith-answered perspective. It is through growing in our ability to discern what is what, right? And I would say, if we look at our faith, from the beginning of time, God has created our innermost being and made us wonderful and unique, right? That's talked about in the Psalms, right? And God desires for people to become whole, mature, not lacking for anything. That's referenced in the book of James, right? This maturation process is evident throughout the Bible. You can see it in Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, the disciples. Paul.
Yes.
Talk about someone who changed positions over the course of his lifetime, right?
But see, the funny thing is our faith tradition has kept us from seeing growth.
Right.
That we just think, wow, the disciples showed up and they had it all together.
They figured it out day one.
Or Paul had it all figured out day one. And we missed the
Same with David. He never made any mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even like David, dude. But we get this, but even with Paul, we get this idea where, early on, like in Galatians or something like that, he's saying, hey, if you want to know what it looks like to have your stuff together and follow Jesus, look like me.
Right.
To the end of his life, he's going, I'm the least.
Yep.
I'm the worst.
Yep.
I'm just barely getting in, that kind of attitude, right? And I think there's a maturing that happens in Paul that sometimes even our faith won't let us see it because of our tradition. But when Paul traveled through a lot of different cultures,
Yep.
a lot of different cities, a lot of different towns and talked with a lot of different people. And this guy was constantly breaking what we would call faith taboos.
Right.
Constantly. And he was helping people embrace faith within their culture.
Another guy did that. His name was Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. Man, I like that guy. I do.
But he broke a lot of norms.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And that is something that I would say until even while I was I went to Bible college, I didn't learn that. Right? Just the extent of how much of a disruption to the cultural and societal norms. And we have to understand in that period of history, culture and faith, that was one piece.
Absolutely.
They were not distinct items as much as they are now, right?
Right.
When we talk about, the union of church and state, well, that there was one church and state, right, in Israel. And so Jesus came in and he just changed everything. He changed church and he changed state. Right? How to approach both, going against the norm in both. It is unique.
Absolutely. And so I just think that we, part of wisdom is pausing.
Yep.
And I think too many times in our being faith informed, we end up reacting versus responding. We don't take the minute to pause.
Right.
And ask good questions. We assume we might know.
Yep.
Or we assume what a person's thinking or what culture's saying, but we haven't really taken the time to think through that process.
And I would say the reason why we often presume we know the answer is because there is a deep-seated root. There's something deep within us that has informed us already of what that answer is before we get there. And this is where, like I mentioned, both you and I have worked in the counseling circles. Social science can help us understand the natural side of human growth. And this is where we both see a huge amount of value for social growth, for personal growth on a non-faith side, because it can actually inform us of things in our faith. Right? We put on workshops, do different aspects to really work on the social science side of things, right? Maybe the more practical counseling, psychology aspects that we can apply in our own lives. But we do that so that it can help grow our faith.
Right.
Because we often uncover things about ourselves that have impacted the way we understand faith. Right? And so it is a both and scenario.
For sure. And what you just said a few minutes ago around truth is pretty compelling, because I personally believe that all truth is God's truth.
Right.
Right? I believe that. It's one of my cores.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to me whether that truth comes out of Scripture, science, maths, the social sciences. Truth is God's truth. And just like you were talking a few minutes ago about putting on workshops and things of that nature to help us understand things better, to actually help our faith. I remember at a point in time, now you're going to laugh at this.
All right.
But I remember at a point in time, I was actually at my first church. One of the pastors there actually believed that depression, anxiety, all of that kind of stuff was because you were demon oppressed.
Right.
Now, that might be true in some certain minor instances, but yet the social sciences has actually said your faith is wrong, and here's some evidence of this, and here's how you can move forward in faith and embrace truth from a different source and moving forward. So see, I see truth as maybe the bridge builder.
Yep.
With culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think for me, again, I go back to this whole idea of faith informed, faith answered, right? And there is an aspect, you mentioned it earlier in the episode. We are all searching kind of for this foundation from which to move. I don't think any of us enjoy living in a place of shifting sands, right?
No,
rising
not at all.
tides, where we're constantly being moved from one place to another. Having a foundation is kind of what gives us a sense of security, a sense of calm, right? That sense of security is a natural drive for all of us.
Well, and I think COVID's a natural indicator of that. It has upended everything. and people don't know how to respond.
Right.
It's they're angry, or they're agreeing with, or they're rebelling, or it's all because something deep has shifted.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you,
No.
but I just wanted our fans,
Oh,
I'm just playing, our friends to understand that what you're saying is actually very, very real.
yeah, and really that's where we're going to go this season, right? Is this idea of how do we ask these really good questions, and then how do we shift that and ask questions around that question? Because you can't just ask a question and answer it, right? Asking a question usually will lead to additional questions, because you're going to have to unpack all the layers that got you to your previous answer to understand how to come up with potentially another answer. And you might unpeel all those layers and come up with the same answer the second time. But the benefit of that comes in the fact that you now know that you've gotten there, that you've done the work to understand why you believe that, where that comes from, the impact that has on you and the people around you. And that's what we want to see. So I've kind of come at it with this approach. This season, the first season, we were thinking. Right? Now we're going to take that thinking, and we're going to decide some things about it. We're going to make some decisions and lead people through where we've come up with our own decisions, right? And then as we move, this is forecasting, but as we move through the season and into the third season that'll wrap up this year, then we're going to talk about how to act and live through those decisions.
Right, absolutely. And I think, what you said about going through the process, that can't be understated how important that is, because not only do I maybe change or become more rooted in what I already thought, but the benefit of all of that is that I'm a better human. I understand where people are coming from without assuming where they're coming from.
Because we will approach people and interact with people in our daily lives that, shocker, they don't believe the same things as us.
No.
I know, it's hard to believe.
No.
The benefit, and I really want to point this out because you talk about that, it highlights how critical when we go through that process to actually learn, when we go through that process to affirm our beliefs or evaluate our beliefs, it gives us the ability to understand where people might make a different decision, where they might branch down a different path. Now, we don't have to agree on that path with that person, but if we understand, okay, they went through this process, they've asked the same questions I've asked, and they've arrived at this destination. Now I have a slightly better idea of why. And that can make a huge difference as we interact and work with people that have different beliefs.
And I think this is crucial too. Now, this is going to be profound, and I want you to follow me here. And I'm going to use Brendan as an example.
Oh boy,
I'll use myself as well.
No, you can use me.
But this is a common starting place.
Yep.
For people maybe, is Brennan, you have never, ever not been white, middle class.
Correct.
I have never, ever, ever been anything other than white and from a lower middle class income.
Yep.
I don't know what it's like to be Asian.
No idea.
I don't know what it's like to be African American. I have no clue. I don't know what it's like to be First Nations. I don't know what it's like to be Latino. I have no clue.
Yep.
I have no clue what those experiences are like. And if I approach people with that white mindset, that everybody's the same.
Everyone comes from the same perspective
exactly,
as I come from.
and the whole 9 yards, well, you're starting automatically from a bad place, a wrong place. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes our faith has done that because Jesus looks a lot like you and me, we think. And our table just went down. That's awesome.
Got to be careful about that.
Yeah, so Jesus looks a lot like
He looks like us.
But in fact, Jesus is very different than us, obviously. And so I think that should give us, at least in that one area, should give us pause to say, you know what, we're going to ask some better questions. We're going to pause, not react. We're going to respond. And we're going to look at kind of how to live life through that. And so I'm excited about this season.
I think it's going to be good. I think
Yes.
we're really going to move some of these questions along. They were some great questions, but I'm excited to get into the biblical perspective on it, our faith foundations on it, because you and I have wrestled with a lot of these questions in our own lives, and I know we're not the only ones.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be good.
It's going to be great. Well, listen, guys, thanks for joining us. And I just want to say again, Catoctin.
Yeah, Catoctin.
Yes, Catoctin, which is a mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah, it's an area outside of DC. It's a beautiful mountain.
Beautiful
It's
place.
an Aboriginal name for it. They're paying homage to First Nations.
Talk to Kelly, 100%. Talk to Kelly. Order you this whiskey-aged coffee. I promise you, you will not be disappointed.
Nope.
Thanks again, Kelly, for setting this up, and we'll see you next week, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.